Atheist Nomads episode 388. They stormed the Capitol.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Seriously, what the fuck?
I laughed nervously.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and joining me is Lauren.
Hello.
At least for now.
Yeah.
We recorded the first part of the news on Tuesday.
Before the shit hit the fan?
January 5th, including some thoughts I thought would be kind of cute or funny, where I made a prediction about how I thought today was going to go, and then we would find out later in the episode. And in my worst possible idea, I could not have possibly imagined that for the first time since August 1814 that people would storm the U.S. Capitol.
And they weren't Canadian or British.
American citizens claiming to be fucking patriots stormed the U.S. Capitol, causing the United States Congress to have to evacuate to an army base. This is goddamn 2021.
We're just going to go all Mad Max style after this, I think.
If you were hoping that 2020 was the shitty year and that it couldn't get worse, what today demonstrated is it sure as hell can.
Oh, it's like climate change. It's just going to keep getting worse.
Yeah. Every year that is a horrible, horrible, terrible, couldn't possibly be worse hurricane or fire season. Next year probably won't be worse, but in the next 5 years, there will probably be one that's worse. 2020 was the setup for what either could be a very important and necessary reform and freaking reckoning time period, or it is going to make 2020 look like a good year.
Like a Sunday picnic.
Like, oh yeah, 2020, it was just the year of staycation.
Yeah.
Because at the rate this is going, we could end up being in the middle of a fucking civil war here by spring.
Ugh, you know which side where we would be stuck on.
If the shit starts hitting the fan, we're packing up important stuff like the mixer and microphones and
the important stuff? Like your child's baby photos, but the mixer, definitely.
Yes. Okay, heck, Lauren, one of the reasons why I wanted to get a laptop that I can actually do the podcast from was to not need to haul a desktop out if the shit hits the fan this year.
I'm glad that you didn't tell me that before, because damn it, dude.
Because if a civil war starts, we're not going to stay in Idaho.
No, that's not good.
We would go crash at my parents' in Oregon.
On the good side of the Cascades.
Not in the Willamette Valley. It's still on the conservative
it's a little
side.
South, but
that they do live in Oregon South.
Yeah. Methford.
But man, like there is no way I would have. I was expecting that the pro-Trump protests would turn into a violent riot. I would not have predicted it would have turned into an armed mob, overpowering Capitol Police and storming and taking complete control of the U.S. Capitol.
Just idiots proving that walls don't work. But
these are idiots proving that the Republic is broken, that it's shattered.
Oh, maybe, yeah. And maybe that's needed to be shown.
You know, there have been a lot of people thinking that Biden needs to just get us back to the old times, the old ways. No. What the last 4 years have shown us, 5 years have shown us now, is the Republic is broken. It is shattered. The Democrats, when Kamala Harris gets sworn in as vice president, will be taking control of the Senate. The Democrats still have control of the House. Joe Biden will be president. There's a chance for reform. That reform has to be more than just reform. The Republic needs to be rebuilt. Fricking right-wing radicals stormed the Capitol, and if the staffers in the Senate hadn't picked up the ballots that had fallen on the floor while they were trying to evacuate, states' votes would have been burned.
I mean, that's all backed up. And, that would have been just...
Yeah.
But it's the principle.
It's the principle and it's the symbolism. Like, the Electoral College is the symbolic thing
Yeah, you should have burned
we need to get rid of. This ceremony where Congress is signing off on the Electoral College results is a ceremonial thing. Now, granted, a lot of these ceremonial things are there for when crazy bullshit happens, like what Trump's been trying to do. Like basically the entire system has been written to make sure that Trump doesn't get elected or reelected.
Yeah.
And it failed to keep him from getting elected. Fortunately, it's not going to fail to keep him from getting a second term.
Yeah. He doesn't know that. He's convinced that he can like just bully Pence into switching the votes for him. Complete nut job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, hey, can you just do this? And he's like, in front of the freaking national news. He's like, dude, no, I can't do that for you. Could you be more subtle?
And this is just so freaking, I mean, seriously, it's, you know, we talked on here a couple months ago about whether or not the U.S. has outlived its time. We not only had an armed mob storm and take over the Capitol, but massive protests, some armed mobs at almost every state capital around the country.
Right. Because if you were on their side, you'd be pissed.
No, this is a symbolic show of force that they will overthrow every government in the United States.
Yeah, that's
what these.
There's not much to empathize there with.
That's what these Second Amendment rallies in downtown Boise have been about. Is if you
the Trump train.
Oh, even before the Trump train.
Yeah, that's true.
Dating back at least 10 years, the whole time I've been here, yeah, they do these Second Amendment rallies to make sure that everybody knows that if you do wrong, we'll take over the Capitol. You know, and it's been 200 years since there has been a coup in a U.S. state. If I remember correctly, that was Connecticut in like 1810.
Not that they haven't been tried. There's been attempted ones, but no.
Yeah, and this is, if you needed proof that Trump and his right-wing ilk were trying to destroy democracy, storming the Capitol is that final definitive proof.
And that's why the other side calls themselves anti-fascist, because people who are willing to militarily take over a democracy to instill something like a dictatorship is really fascist.
Yes.
So, you know, say what you will of Antifa. It's just, at least the idea is there. There's a good ideal there.
Yeah.
What the U.S. has always had. That democracy will prevail, and these people are actively trying to dismantle it. It's like, oh, okay, maybe our democracy needs to grow up a little bit, but you don't want to just tear it down and put in an idiot for dictator.
Right. You know, and the way I was wanting to open this episode, and I think for patrons, you'll get to hear.
Oh, you should definitely do a side-by-side.
Stupid predictions, hopes, and fears.
Yeah, it was sweet.
I have no predictions for 2021 now. With seeing the news today, you cannot predict anything this year. And I'm afraid it's a coin flip between either fulfilling all of my hopes or all of my fears.
I think it'll fulfill a few hopes. That I'm being optimistic.
On the hope side would be we get meaningful reform. We get a rebuilding of the wall of separation in church and state with Democrats being in power and the Congressional Free Thought Caucus in place and whatnot. That the damage of the Trump administration, the theocratic damage.
I hope DC gets statehood.
And getting DC and Puerto Rico statehood.
Yes, and Puerto Rico, because then you'd have a state that's mostly black and a state that's mostly Latino.
Yep.
Yes, we need that. And we need, never mind.
So that'd be hopes. That the reform, in a true reform sense of major reformation, begins and happens.
I mean, there are people out there who have spent their entire lives studying how to rebuild a democracy in case it fails here in the U.S. I say get them on a committee.
There are Americans,
get those nerds in a think tank, and
the U.S. has a lot of experience with nation building. We need to do some of that at home.
Yeah, we're good at puppet governments, but
also
something that actually works on its own, I don't know.
Also, in the hopes is that we can all safely be able to have Thanksgiving with our families.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to have family gatherings again.
Even if it's lockdown outside of that. If by Thanksgiving it's considered safe to have a big family gathering, that would be fulfilling one of my biggest hopes for 2021.
Is it sad that mine mostly revolve around camping? I just want to get away.
Yeah.
I'm stuck in the house all day, every day, for weeks.
My 2021 fears are we end up in a civil war and the pandemic never ends.
Yeah. And not enough people get vaccinated.
And that violence
or
interferes with the vaccination program even more than just people refusing it.
People actively going out and destroying vaccines, which has been done.
Add to it the nation-state cybersecurity hacks that have been targeting vaccine manufacturers and will likely, and also been targeting healthcare agencies, organizations. Like 85% of cybersecurity incidents this year have been on hospitals, doctors' offices, insurance companies, and the like. It's been healthcare.
I guess people assume that healthcare has a lot of money. Has it been ransomware, or is it just...
Most of it's been ransomware.
Yeah.
Because healthcare, that is critical data because... for one example, one of the projects...
They don't have a lot of money, but they have a lot of people who would give them money to save all of that.
Well, when you look at the kind of issues that happen with data systems in a healthcare setting, for example, the Go Live I'm working on still right now, we've got a glitch impacting the smallest hospital that is impacting getting...
We see you, Baker City. We love you.
It all matters. And even if it's only 10 or 15 patients a day, that really, really matters. That's 10 or 15 people's lives.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with some of these cybersecurity incidents with hospitals, there are double-digit death tolls on some of those. And a combination of right-wing terrorist activities and Russian hacking.
And Chinese hacking.
Could completely destabilize and help shatter the healthcare system. And in the process, completely screw up being able to get vaccine rollout.
Yeah, I can just hear people like my brother in the back of my mind going, well, maybe the healthcare system needs to be burned down. The problem is the amount of people that would die doing that is astronomical.
Now, your brother's response to that would be, it's just a bunch of baby boomers.
It's just, no, dude, it's you. It's the underemployed who don't have health insurance, who goes to the ER for something minor and ends up dying because freaking sepsis or something.
An asthmatic who can't quite seem to stop smoking things and also lives in a house with radon?
No, that was he hasn't smoked in a while, a long while, and he doesn't live in that house anymore.
But still, yeah.
So that was fun.
Everybody who thinks that 2021 is the magic bullet to end 2020, it's not.
I still think people can be optimistic, though.
Yes, we should all be optimistic. We should all hope that 2021 can be better.
Yeah, because even if it's just shaming your Trumpite friends on Facebook or refusing to talk to family members who are backing this kind of rhetoric, shaming them in public, supporting the politicians who are actually trying to do good things for you.
And wearing a mask and practicing social distancing and getting your vaccine.
Yes.
When it's your turn. Which is the key thing here. Remember, whenever it is your turn, that is when you should get it. I still have guilt about it having already been my turn.
Yeah. That's okay.
And I will.
You'll just have guilt about it.
Yeah.
You can't fix that.
Nope. All right. In the news, we're going to start off with a couple of stories from Pakistan. What's crazy is there was enough news from Pakistan that I saw this week that it could have been, they could have just been the focus of the entire episode.
Wow, that's not good.
It was a mixed bag.
Oh, interesting.
Like some of the positive stories that I'm not going to necessarily be covering in detail. One was their new prime minister has announced as policy objectives universal healthcare and a right to not go to bed hungry. That's huge.
Yeah. I was just thinking that there's such a good way to like get around that. It's like, okay, you have enough money to eat one meal, and that one meal will be right before you go to bed. Therefore, promise fulfilled.
Those are for, And there was a ruling from one of their highest courts in their most populated province that the way they've been handling rape cases is totally ass backwards, and they need to figure out how to actually take care of victims.
That's a novel idea.
Yeah. But, of course, it's Pakistan. They are, and by they, specifically, Pakistani regulators are complaining about Google and Wikipedia for, quote, disseminating sacrilegious content, end quote.
Yeah. Okay, you take on the internet. Go for it.
This is stuff like caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, a unauthentic version of the Quran.
You mean one of the many satirical ones that are out there?
That could even just be an English language translation.
Yeah.
If it's not in the original Arabic, it's not authentic.
True. That's just so petty.
Yeah, and so the Pakistan Telecommunication Authority is also issuing. They're talking about these on Twitter, which is filled with sacrilegious content.
I would just love to just tweet itself right out of existence, because these politicians, they're older, they're old men who have finally figured out one thing that they can use to talk to the hip young folk, and they are just murdering it.
Yeah.
Do they not see the irony there?
Oh, the unauthentic version of the Quran was uploaded by the Ahmadiyya community on the Google Play Store. They used Twitter for their press release. And they're considering taking full legal action under the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act of 2016, as well as Rules 2020.
Oh, boy.
One of the things that brought this about was complaints they got about what they claim to be misleading search results with present Khalifa of Islam. Lauren was telling me off mic about what she was finding on the description, which would fit with the Islamic State.
Right. You got the Islamic State, which follows Sharia law. Their leader is a Khalifa.
Yep. And so search results about the Khalifa of the Islamic State would be viewed by Pakistani regulators as misleading information about who's the leader of Islam.
That's yeah. Well, I mean, I'm confused. So,
but when you're dealing with misleading results about terms like that would be like the Vatican suing in a European court against Google search results showing up. They could possibly return a result about the Pope of the Pope of Alexandria, the other Pope.
Yeah, that would be misleading and confusing and is out there.
It would be confusing. It's not necessarily misleading. There is the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. There is also a Pope in the Coptic Church. There is also a Pope in the Ethiopian Church. That's not misleading to say that they are popes.
Popes.
Just like it's not misleading to say that there are people who claim to be caliphs. Even if you don't view that person as a caliph, that doesn't mean other people don't.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have that kind of view of things. And while...
You can't sue the internet.
No.
Sorry.
And they're going after Google as if it is the internet.
They think they are.
And while I have my issues with Google, for sure, I don't think that this is the right approach to take any kind of actions to address any of the actual issues with Google. The fact that it returns search results is not any of the problems with Google. And if they start down, so they've already banned TikTok for immoral and lewd content, and if they go after, if they ban Wikipedia and then they ban Google, what's next? And how long until the internet in Pakistan looks a lot more like the internet in, say, Iran or China?
Yeah, well, that's obviously what they want.
Where it's controlled by the state. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, a Muslim mob destroyed and burned a Hindu temple. This was in northwest Pakistan. Khyber Pass, this would be near Khyber Pass, so that's kind of in the area around where the borders of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and China kind of come together, which would make it also pretty close to India. Most people know that, the partitioning between Pakistan and India was the Muslim majority areas go into Pakistan and the Hindu majority areas go into India, but they were all majority areas. There was a lot of moving back and forth with Muslims moving from what became India into what became Pakistan, and Hindus moving from Pakistan to India. There are still Hindus in Pakistan, and India has more Muslims than I think any country other than Indonesia.
It doesn't matter what the percentage is, they're going to have more people.
Yeah, right.
Because they have so many people.
Right. But Pakistan still does have Hindus, and a group of Muslims went and burned down this temple. In response to that, the provincial government has pledged to rebuild it.
The Islamic local government.
Yes, the local government of the Islamic State of Pakistan, or Islamic Republic of Pakistan, has determined that they will rebuild a Hindu temple.
Good, because forming a mob and burning stuff down shouldn't be rewarded by the government.
And the government did condemn the damage from the mob.
They're like, dudes.
And by mob, we're talking 1,500 people.
Whoa. Wow, they were pissed.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's insane. I mean, good for the government, but there's a lot of people that need to be arrested too.
45 were out of 1,500.
Yeah, well, mobs are mostly made up of people who don't really know what they're doing.
Oh, actually, I should have
read the article first.
Read more of the article. No Hindus actually live in the area where this temple is, but it is visited by devotees paying homage to Sri Parahanas, who died there prior to the partition of India. So while there are Hindus in Pakistan, there aren't Hindus in that village. That village where everybody's Muslim decided they wanted to tear down the Hindu shrine that is in their town.
Okay. There are proper ways of doing that, though. If you don't like the frickin' temple, you're like, okay, there aren't anybody here that worships this. Can we turn it into something else? Then zoning comes in and decides to turn it into a community center or something. You don't just go burn it down. Then you just piss off the people that it's representing, and that's not what you want to do.
You know, and I as a devout secularist, there is a part of me who cringes at the thought of a government funding the rebuilding of a religious building.
Yeah, that seems kind of stupid.
In the same way that I had some cringing about Notre Dame being rebuilt by the French government. That was a church.
Yep.
Getting rebuilt by the government.
Yep.
I have had minor issues with it and was generally fine. Didn't take issue with the French government rebuilding Notre Dame, because even though the French government is a secular government, Notre Dame Cathedral is a museum at this point.
It's a major historical landmark.
And yes, a major landmark. Now, Pakistan is a completely different situation. When you have a theocratic regime with state-sponsored religion, secularism does not apply.
No.
And a theocratic regime using state funds to undo the damage of their majority population to protect a minority is freaking awesome.
Right. And that's what it's all about, is if they let that temple get burned down without any consequences, then that's when you start to become the bully. You're starting to allow these mobs to get away with what they're doing, and pretty soon you've got Hindus running for their lives, and you don't want to be known as that kind of place.
Right. Most Hindus have already fled for their lives out of Pakistan, so... Okay, maybe not fleeing for their lives, but most of them were not comfortable there anymore. And in the U.S., the Satanic Temple has put up 2 billboards so far in Texas and Florida, and they are working on more states next, encouraging followers to challenge state restrictions on abortions by claiming that those restrictions violate their religious beliefs as Satanists. The billboard's text reads, "Abortions save lives. Pregnancy and complication are the 6th most common cause of death among women between the ages of 20 and 34. Our religious abortion ritual averts many state restrictions." That's it. That's all it says.
Okay. Say that last line again.
Our religious abortion ritual averts many state restrictions.
I'm too tired to make sense of that right now.
By making it a religious ritual, it gains RFRA protection.
Right. Okay. Yeah, got it.
Even if it's ritual in a very loose sense. The Washington Times ran a column from Cheryl Chumley, and the Washington Times is not to be confused with the Washington Post or the New York Times.
Is it the state of Washington, or is it...
No, this is Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The Washington Times is a far right-wing, run by the Moonies paper, with the explicit purpose of right-wing conservative views on...
Parler and print.
And so much older than Parler.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah. But yeah, so Chumley wrote about Dr. Fauci and about how he is a horrible, immoral person who cannot be trusted. Why? You might be wondering. She wrote, quote, "More than that, he's a humanist, meaning he takes his moral compass from his own mind. He has little to no concern with the stuff of higher authority, the constraints that come from fears of heavenly accountability."
Nope.
End quote. Later, she wrote, quote, "An atheist in charge of U.S. government, policy, economics, education, and constitutional freedoms as they relate to coronavirus response. What could go wrong, right?"
Yeah, that's... I didn't know he was an atheist.
He doesn't talk about it.
No, because he's not stupid.
But he was asked about it directly in a 2015 interview. He was asked about religion, and he identified as a humanist and said that despite his Catholic upbringing, or that he was a humanist despite his Catholic upbringing, because, quote, "I have faith in the goodness of mankind."
Aw. Think he's changed his mind?
No, actually I don't. So yeah, the issue isn't that he's doing anything wrong. The issue is that he can't do anything right because he's not afraid of burning in hell.
Yeah, because if you're not under some kind of threat, you obviously are not capable of doing something good.
Yeah.
Gotta love that logic.
Well, and also the logic of him being in charge of U.S. government, policy, economics, education, and constitutional freedoms.
Yeah, what the hell is that all about?
He's an advisor.
On one topic.
There are lots of advisors. He happens to be the top national expert on infectious disease and has a ridiculous amount of experience advising governments on infectious disease. Like, there is nobody more qualified than him to provide advice about infectious disease. Advisors do not make the policies. It is the elected and appointed officials who make those policies, not the advisors.
Now that's misleading on the internet.
Yes. All right, well, we're going to pause here for the listeners just for a few seconds. For us, it'll be a whole day.
Hooray.
Lauren's back has been really bothering her for the last little bit, so she will not be joining us for the rest of the episode. She's powered through on 2 days now to cover the first part of the news yesterday and 2 openings. And this will actually be the first time in quite a while that patrons get something special. And for the patrons, keep on listening past the end and you will get my 1 day older predictions, hopes, and fears. But let's get back into the news. Pat Robertson is someone who, like, I would say he is one of the best people to embody the a wrong clock is right twice a day mentality. He has been very strongly pro-Trump almost always, except for when Trump pulled U.S. Special Forces away from northern Syria, from our Kurdish allies there. And now, where he has publicly acknowledged that Joe Biden is president-elect, and he has called on Trump to admit that he lost, saying that he's erratic and stuck in an alternate reality. Here's the clip.
I think the Electoral College has spoken. I think the Biden corruption has not totally been brought to fruition, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the Electoral College. And I don't think the Supreme Court is going to move in to do anything. And I think we're going to see a President Biden, and I also think we'll be seeing a President Kamala Harris not too long after the inauguration of President Biden. With all his talent and the ability to raise money and draw large crowds, the president still lives in an alternate reality. He really does. People say, well, he lies about this, that, and the other. But no, he isn't lying. To him, that's the truth. He had the biggest crowd on Inauguration Day. He had more people than ever. He was the most popular people. He saved NBC, but with The Apprentice, you go down the line of things that really aren't true. And, people kept pointing to them. But because they loved him so much and he was so strong for the evangelicals were with him all the way. But there was something about him that was good, that God placed him in that office for the time. He's done a marvelous job for the economy. But at the same time, he is very erratic, and he's fired people, and he's fought people, and he's insulted people, and keeps...
Yeah, it's now twice that Pat Robertson has turned on Trump. Hopefully this one's permanent. But yeah, even Pat Robertson is no longer on Trump's side. Calvary Chapel, San Jose in California has been completely ignoring COVID restrictions. They have been continuing to hold large indoor services. They do not require face masks, and they do not enforce any kind of social distancing. The pastor has also openly bragged, including during live streams, about how the church is not complying. As he said in May, quote, "God doesn't want us to isolate ourselves. All of us need to be in the sanctuary. I don't care what they say. I'm never going to close the doors, ever." So in response, the county has been fining them and kept fining them. They fined them $350,000 for violating the shutdown. When the church didn't pay, they filed a lawsuit and demanded the court shut the place down. The church still hasn't shut down, and the fines have now risen to over $1 million. Interestingly, the church took $340,000 in money from the Paycheck Protection Program so they could pay their employees to keep them at home while they were shut down, but they didn't lock down. Not only that, and when they were asked by the press as to how many employees the Paycheck Protection Program saved, they said that there wasn't anybody available from their finance department to answer that. And in COVID news, Israel is doing better at vaccinating their population than any other country. Like, they have impressively vaccinated more than 10% of their population already. This is incredible. Not only that, but they are distributing vaccines throughout their country, including deep into the West Bank, where they're being administered to Jewish settlers only, and not to any Palestinians. There are to Israel's position on this is that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza will be taking advantage of the poor country programs that the World Health Organization has to get them low-cost vaccines. While Israel, who has been paying above market rates to get more vaccines than any other country's been able to get, doesn't have to help the self-governed regions under their occupation. Because they're self-governed. They haven't asked for help. They just need to handle it themselves. Everybody else is looking at this as Israel is an occupying power. They have the money. The countries they are occupying do not. Because they're under occupation, they do not have the financial ability to buy that much vaccine for their people. Israel, as the occupying power, has the responsibility to vaccinate them, or at least get the vaccines and share them. And what's kind of sad here is, well, other than the humanitarian issue of Jewish settlers in the West Bank in illegal settlements getting vaccines, while the Palestinians surrounding them have to wait for several more months before even their frontline health workers start to get them, is that many of those settlements, and also quite a few cities in Israel, more proper, rely on workers from the West Bank from the Palestinians. They rely on people to provide services who they are not willing to vaccinate, which means that's keeping an open vector into their communities, despite the fact that they are going to be inoculating their community more quickly, which means that's continuing to put at risk their people who don't respond to the vaccine or who are unable to get the vaccine. It's short-sighted, it's callous, and it's another example of why apartheid systems don't work and need to go away. In Ashland, Oregon, a church is getting a lot of criticism for their Christmas Eve service, after pictures started to make after they posted a video on their Instagram page of a whole lot of people packed in tightly, not wearing masks, singing. In other words, the definition of a super spreader event. After this got spread around the internet, the church went ahead and removed the video, but it was way too late. And they've been getting threats. And there's some graffiti on their church wall that says COVID spreader. The local community around them is just pissed. The local, the Jackson County medical director, the county that Ashland's in, and Ashland, since most of you probably aren't aware, is just south of Medford, Oregon. It's right on I-5, just barely north of the California border, if that helps. But yeah, the medical director for the county even said that, he believes religion's important, but spiritual leaders should take better safety precautions. He said, quote, "Well, we know that in the past that those church gatherings are super spreader events. They have all the characteristics. People are singing and speaking with loud voices. They're close together. They're indoors. We're in the middle of a spike in cases. It's the perfect storm for significant spread." Now, after the November Supreme Court ruling saying that New York couldn't have strict attendance limits for places of worship, the Oregon government decided to lift restrictions on religious gatherings and change them to just guidelines, which means churches are all free to do this. They really, really shouldn't. Sean Fucht is a Christian musician and activist who held an outdoor New Year's Eve event in the parking lot of the Higher Vision Church in Valencia, California. This is a neighborhood in Los Angeles County where he had 2,500 people packed in for a concert and worship service, which from his Instagram account shows mostly hundreds of maskless people packed shoulder to shoulder singing during the concert. LA County, unlike the state of Oregon, requires religious services to use physical distancing and ensure that masks are worn at all times. One of the things Fucht wrote on a post of the video was, quote, "I refuse to allow a virus with a 99% survival rate to keep me from plundering hell to populate heaven," end quote. A 99% survival rate. So he held what would be a textbook super spreader event, risking the possible death of, even by his own numbers, of 25 people. I doubt many people, religious or otherwise, if they were told, all right, yeah, go ahead and hold this event, but 1 out of 100 people who come are going to die because of it. I don't think many people would do that. And realistically, it's not going to be 1% of the people in attendance. It's just going to be those who are near asymptomatic people or people who are symptomatic and went anyway, who are spreading it. So say maybe 500 people are exposed. So only 5 people are going to die. Is that worship service actually worth killing 5 people? I highly doubt he would actually say that. And that's what these anti-lockdown, anti-mask, mostly Christian people aren't realizing with these events is that, no, even if it's not that deadly, that if, a 99% survival rate's not that bad. It's actually a better than 99% survival rate. That doesn't matter. Our medical system is designed to be able to handle a moderately bad flu year. It's not designed to be able to handle something that requires 2 or 3% to be hospitalized. It can't handle that. Los Angeles County is in crisis standards of care. If you get in a car accident and you're not likely to survive, they're not going to take you to the hospital. If you're really old and you have a heart attack, they're going to leave you to die in your home because hospitals can't take people because they're full. You know, I've talked in recent weeks about what I've been hearing about what crisis standards of care will be like here in Boise. They haven't happened here, but they are happening now in Los Angeles. Even if those 2,500 people, if none of them get COVID, the chance of one of them getting into a car accident and not being able to get medical care and dying on the way while an ambulance was waiting to have a hospital to unload the person in was ridiculously high. That is reckless. It is despicable. All right, this is a weird one to try to parse through. A Greek Orthodox priest in Kalamata from the Church of Agios Nicholas in Barrio. It's a Greek Orthodox priest. I think that's as much as we need to know. He was in the middle of his church service when he stopped, interrupted the service, and asked everybody not wearing a mask to leave. Nobody captured this on video, but as he was talking to people, asking them to leave, some argued back, and the priest's response was, quote, "We will not start a dialogue. Those who do not wear a mask should leave. Respect your fellow human beings and the law." The standards that the Greek Orthodox Church had set, which I am sure were negotiated with the Greek government, which Greece is a country where the church is a part of the government, is that churches will be open for worship and private prayer, especially on Christmas, New Year's, and Epiphany, that they will only allow one person per 15 square meters with at least 2 meters between people and require mask wearing, and that they will only allow 25 people in churches and only 50 people in metropolitan cathedrals. And yeah, this priest did not allow them to get away with it. That's really nice to see. All right. In feedback, we've got Martin via the website. Hello, Lauren, Dustin, and family. Happy holidays. Eo Saturnalia. I'm listening to your latest episode on Christmas Eve and had to comment to your offhanded remark on raw ground beef. I thought the following might be interesting in the spirit of cultural exchange. I live in Germany, and here raw minced pork is very common. Usually it is spiced with salt, pepper, and raw onions, and call it Matt. He gave a pronunciation guide that is spoken almost like Matt, even though it's spelled M-E-T-T, pronounced more like the name Matt in English. He went on, "We regularly eat it on bread rolls. I repeatedly heard Americans are grossed out by this, but I feel it's just a case of appropriate sanitary regulation for the butchers. If eaten fresh, there are no health risks and it's delicious. I think the law here is that the minced meat has to be sold on the same day as produced, along with other sanitary precautions. There is a tradition since the 1950s to offer Matt at parties shaped like a hedgehog with raw onion spikes, usually with bread rolls, pretzels, or similar." And he gave a couple references that I will include in the show notes. And then he finished, "Have a great time and enjoy the holidays. Best regards, Martin from Karlsruhe, Germany." Martin, I know there are safe ways to eat raw meat. That is something I am aware of. It's something I've done. I've had, I don't remember what it was called, but it was some kind of raw meat in a restaurant in Montreal. And yeah, if you do it right, it's perfectly healthy. Meat in healthy animals is sterile and safe to consume while fresh, even raw. Where the problem comes in with American ground meat especially, but actually almost all American meat, is in the way it's butchered. It's the way the animals are hung by their hind legs and cut open allows feces to drain out of the animal over the meat. With steaks, even though that gets cleaned off, the bacteria are still there, and for steaks, you can take care of that by searing the outsides. The inside's still fine, sear the outsides, and it's good. But with ground meat, the outside bits are ground up inside of the ground meat, and people get sick eating raw ground beef in the U.S. way more than they should. And it is absolutely an issue with the sanitary conditions of the butchering. Things are different in Europe than they are in the U.S. The U.S. supply chain is set up very differently than European supply chains are. Just for a great example, you can get in Europe shelf-stable milk and shelf-stable eggs, whereas in the U.S., milk and eggs have to be refrigerated or they might kill you. If you set it up so that's okay, that's fine. And I would be happy to eat raw pork in Germany if it was done correctly and safely to do so, but I would never, ever, ever touch raw meat in the U.S. Well, I touch it all the time to cook it, but I would never eat raw meat in the U.S. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I'm glad to hear that there are safe ways to do it. And a part of me is kind of wondering if Matt is the inspiration of the cannibal sandwich in Wisconsin. There was a lot of German and Scandinavian immigration into the Upper Great Lakes, and it sounds like those two are related. And just like how people from Southeast Asia going mushroom hunting in the US can find stuff that is almost the same as what they had at home, but will kill you here, I wonder if this is similar. And from Rich via the website, your interview with Britt Hermes was illuminating. Valid scientific research is difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. Real science is hard, and sadly, our education system too often prefers quick, easy, and fun over hard. Children should be taught basic logic and the scientific method. School boards should be staffed with rational, educated, and sane adults, not religious nutjobs, delusional ideologues, and political hacks. Right, and life should be fair and lunch should be free. Glad to hear you got the vaccine. We need intelligent people to survive the plague. Cheers, Rich. Rich, yeah, thank you for the message. It is amazing how easy it is to get through school and numerous science classes all the way through and not get a grasp of basic science. Those logic principles are theoretically what are being taught in math and science and even English classes, but all too often they aren't. And yeah, we definitely need a lot more critical thinking classes, and whether it's just a couple days on the basics of critical thinking as part of a science class, or even critical thinking courses in our schools. But we don't have that. And from more hoo-ha references via PayPal, because I found this program by asking Alexa, play Itty podcast talking about hoo-has. And not once have you discussed hoo-has. I am donating in hopes that hoo-has come up in future podcasts. Note, donations to bring forth hoo-ha talk has been proven more effective than prayer or letters to Santa, so that's the route selected at this time. Thank you, more hoo-ha references. I know I've talked about this before, but to provide the backstory on the hoo-ha warning. So it would have been episode 85 or 87. These were from March of 2015 when we had Nick Morgan Moore on the show. And the interview went way long and got split in two, which would mean that the particular event in question would have definitely been in episode 87. Nick Morgan Moore talked about licking a woman's asshole during that discussion. A listener, who was Mr. Q from Coronify Me, was listening to the show with his teenage daughter or preteen daughter when that was mentioned. And it was literally like I believe it was a really short, just like mentioned it in passing, and the conversation moved on. And he had to explain analingus to his daughter. So then that other podcaster joined us sometime later in a recording session when Wesley and I were together in Tacoma in Sam Mulvey's from Ask an Atheist studio, and he called us out on that. So then Lauren, who at the time was becoming more of a regular guest on the show, recorded a warning, and that warning has been in place seriously for like almost 6 years now, 5 to 6 years. And in that time span, the amount of the edginess of the discussion has gone way down as we have matured and the lineup on the show has changed and shifted. And it's not particularly relevant to the podcast anymore, but we get almost as much feedback about, like, positive feedback about the hoo-ha lady than anything else on the show. So I haven't removed it, and I think there'd be quite the outcry if I did remove it. So it has stayed in despite being false advertising in a way. It's resulted in quite the ethical conundrum. However, to rectify this, the next episode will be the hoo-ha episode with Lauren, Aaron, and Liz, who all have been on the podcast before. Aaron quite a bit, including as a co-host. And it will be 3 women. I'm producing the episode, but I will not be hosting. So this will be interesting. If you want to support the show, you can find out how at atheistnomads.com/donate or at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's it for this week. So until next time, remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads. It is 2021.
Yep.
Happy New Year. And I think it would be good to start with some predictions, hopes, and fears for the year.
Okay.
So, Lauren, do you have any? What do you predict?
I got nothing, hon. I'm super. Yeah, sprung that on me.
All right, let me start.
You have a list, right? So
no, I don't.
Oh.
I am winging it. Okay. A prediction I'm going to make that we will know the answer to by the time this episode goes out, and actually by the time we finish recording it, is that Republicans in Congress are going to do their shenanigans while the Proud Boys and other far-right groups engage in a violent riot in Washington, D.C. That is my prediction, and we will know later in this episode if that one happens.
Are you sure you don't just want to record tomorrow?
I absolutely don't want to just record tomorrow, but you are definitely too tired to record now.
I mean, I am, but the timeline of the episode just seems a little funny when it's stretched out like that.
Yeah. So the reason why I say this is going to be, we're recording right now on Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday.
We will we're going to record about half the episode, and then we'll be recording the rest of it tomorrow Wednesday before I edit it. So we will know halfway through the episode.
Maybe you should try to predict something that's not going to happen in the next 12 hours.
Okay, so the rest of it.
That's good.
I also, from some of what I'm seeing in the news with the Proud Boys, I'm going to predict that the next 3 months is going to have a lot of violent right-wing mobs around the country.
Yeah.
It is going to be ugly.
It's going to be that last final stab at anything, burn it all to the ground before hopefully it quiets down and goes away forever.
I predict that Donald Trump will leave the White House, go to Mar-a-Lago, and then run away before they come and arrest him.
Run away! He's got his jet plane ready. Boat. What would that be? The RSS Putin?
I definitely do predict that vaccine rollout in the U.S. will reach a point that we will be able to return to some sort of normalcy, but there won't be enough people getting it to really meaningfully stop the pandemic.
Yep. I know that there's probably going to be a lot of people who aren't going to bother getting it because they think everybody else has gotten it. A lot of people are going to take the first shot and not follow up with the second. So that's not going to work. And then a lot of people are going to go into situations where they're going to expose themselves needlessly because they were told by the government that it's okay to go out again.
Yeah. And we have a story later in the show about grounds for some of these concerns. People that are actually looking into a particular group that is probably not going to be getting the vaccine. Some of my hopes for the year are that, and we'll know the answer to one of these very, very soon, that we'll be able to get some meaningful reform in the government to resolve long-standing, or the erosion of church-state separation, and that we can actually try to recover some of that.
Tear down one wall to build up another.
Build it back better.
Yeah.
I have the hope that the current trend towards autocratic far right-wing regimes, that Biden getting elected is the first step in, say, global dominoes.
Yeah.
Trump was one of the last in that rise, and I hope Biden is one of the first in that turning around the other way.
My mom always described politics as a pendulum.
Yeah.
The problem is that last time we were supposed to go way left, we didn't. So it just went even further right.
Yeah.
In the first pendulum swing, but hopefully this will help.
Yeah. Too close to call on the Senate at this point. And I definitely have the hope that the change in administration, as well as the trends we've been seeing from the courts, means that gay rights, and hopefully by extension rights for trans people, become more and more solidified as being a of course they get equal rights.
Yeah. So there's still people who claim that black people shouldn't have those rights either. So, the is never...
Okay, there's the horrible people,
Okay.
And then there's the legal I'm talking about it being a legal And then 2021 fears, I kind of covered in the predictions. The things I fear might happen this year are really there's the right-wing activist Supreme Court that we have, that they will torpedo any and all reforms that a possible Democratic majority in both the House and Senate, as well as a Democratic president, might try to make. Or that even worse would be Georgia reelects their Republican senators and Mitch McConnell's everything.
To get McConnelled. It's going to be a new verb.
Yeah.
It's a new cock block.
I have a fear that there's going to be enough idiots that refuse to get the vaccine and refuse to be patient while we start to try to gain herd immunity, and also figure out how long these vaccines provide protection for, and get a better understanding of how reinfection works, that the pandemic will just basically go on forever.
Yeah.
Or that there'll be a new strain that gets around the vaccine. No evidence of that yet with the newest strains, but...
We're watching Colorado real closely.
Yeah. And honestly, I can't really have fears about much else at this point.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Keep it light.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't get out of bed tomorrow.
Yeah.